All right, hey guys. Today I want to talk a little bit about tactics specifically for this episode. And this is something that should be pretty straightforward, as most of you think. You know, all the settings are here, and Football Manager does it really well to make sure that you can get a grasp of football tactics. As a manager and also as a new manager, as there's plenty of tips and also references that you can look at. So I'll try to make this video as beginner friendly as possible while getting into a few advanced tactics that you may or may not want to look at in the future. And maybe I will be making another video referring to training to emphasize on the tactics that you create. Because training schedules are usually created by your assistant manager or anyone else that you elect. But if you take the responsibility of creating the training schedule, then you really have to understand how your tactics work. And your training schedule has to be based on those tactics. And just to give you a little bit of backstory, Football Manager started off as this game called Championship Manager, and it's really old. The game is like was made in the 90s, right? And I was a football fan in the early 2000s, not so much in the 90s, because I was still a kid and whatever. But in the early 2000s, I started to pick up, learning about, football as, my own growth as a, school footballer. And I was learning to, how to play football, just, the basics of it, the training of it, the intensity, and all of that. But we never really looked at tactics because we were all just a bunch of noobs, right? And I sucked at football in school. I really sucked at football in school, and most of my footballing talent really grew when I was in college. And I have a feeling it's to do with my passion for football and tactics of football that really grew me as a player because I wanted to be involved in certain tactics. And a lot of them started, I believe, in 2008 or 9 when I picked up Football Manager 2008 actually. But I think I picked it up a year after. So I picked it up in 2009. And ever since then, I've been obsessed with football tactics. And I grew as a footballer. And in college, I actually played really well because I trained really hard. And also, I played in a very central role in most of my games where I was able to coordinate my team and make sure that we get specific tactics done really well. Now, if you guys can see my mouse here, I'm currently controlling Liverpool and I'll be heading into a game versus Brighton. But just to explain to you how the football map works, this grid is actually the exact grid that managers and players use in real life to manage football. So the game actually gives you a very realistic representation of how it actually, how people do it in real life. The football pitch is basically divided into five vertical lanes and I believe another five horizontal lanes. The horizontal lanes are important for you to determine whether the person is in a defensive position, a midfield position, or in a forward position. The defense position is usually held by the first two tiles, the midfield position by the second two tiles, and the forward position by the last two tiles at the top. So there's actually seems to be six grids, but it's actually five with a little with the space that's beyond the penalty box actually not really taken into consideration because the defenders usually just cover those two spaces anyway. However, these may be important in circumstances where you're implementing what do you call this, a more defensive back line and not so much as an offensive one like I'm using right now, because I'm using Gegenpress and my team is staying forward a lot of the time. As you can see, the distance of the defense line is very much in the middle of the pitch, sometimes even higher up the pitch. And in cases like these, you don't really look at the last two boxes. However, if you are operating in a much lower standard, this is the point when you actually hit the very last grid, which is along the line of the penalty box. And defenders usually do not operate here unless they are starting play from the back. So if you're building play from the back, you do start here, but ideally you want to keep your team at least in this position, which is the first grid, the second grid, the third, and the highest, which is actually the fourth grid where the midfielders actually operate. So, as for the what do you call this vertical grids, these are very important where tactics really come into play in moving the ball up the pitch. So, I think this was mostly implemented by, I mean, famously implemented by Pep Guardiola, who I feel actually really came up with a very powerful tactic when he managed clubs like Barcelona and of course Manchester City, and we could see his winning tactics come into play where he designed the team to use their passes to build the ball up vertically using diagonal passing methods. So what I mean is they pass from either the left lower square to the top right square, or the left or the right lower square to the top left square, and using this diagonal method they push the ball vertically up the pitch. And in order to use this tactic effectively, they don't use the far left or the far right grids by themselves. Instead, they use this central grid between the middle and the far corners, known as the half space. And the half spaces have now become a prominent part of football because all of the players who act as pivots, and what I mean by pivots is basically you pass to that player and then they pass it back to the other player, or they pass it forward in order to push the pass to go forward, and this is where they operate. And while the half space can be easily marked, it is the most vulnerable position to being marked, as the wider areas are more difficult to mark and the central areas are also what do you call this, more difficult to mark, because there's usually like two defenders, right? Like for example, I have Van Dijk and Fabinho here. So if an opposition player operated right in the center here, it will be difficult to decide who is going to mark him, because another player could just come out here and outnumber one of these players. So you will now need these three players to work together to decide who are going to mark these two players, while one more player acts as the pivot. So ideally, you want to have Fabinho as the pivot, while Van Dijk and Alexander-Arnold shut them down, or you want to have Fabinho shutting them down while Alexander-Arnold and Van Dijk act as your pivot to get the ball out of the area. So this is a difficult place to mark, but the most vulnerable place to be marked is actually where Henderson currently is, which is the half space. And why that is the case is because he is directly facing a defender here. And that is the same if you were to operate in this area, directly facing the defender. However, it is an excellent place to bait the opposition into attacking or charging or trying to mark you. And by doing that, you actually pull a lot of the, what do you call this, the defensive positioning away from the opponent, because the opponent is focused on marking the player operating in the half space. And usually the players who are picked to operate in half spaces are very, very strong players, able to not only stand their own ground but also take command of certain areas, have very good dribbling skills, have very good balance, and also have the ability to have a very good first touch, which means when the ball comes to them, the moment they get the ball, they're very able to easily get the ball into control, and they're also good decision makers. So having a player with such good coverage is rare, which is why we see some of the best footballers operating in this area. Like for example, you have Mo Salah, who although operates as an inside forward on the wing, an inside forward basically is a winger who rushes to get into the box to allow overlapping wing backs to what do you call this, come in and assist. And while he operates in the far what do you call this, right wing position, as an inside forward you see him rushing into the half space and operating generally in this area before trying to get into the penalty box to push out some goals. And these are currently the strongest what do you call this, ways of building up tactics, by actually showing your opponent that you can be very aggressive in the half space and you're not afraid of the defenders, and that's a nightmare for opposition defenders. And this is how general football tactics work today, especially in the teams that are more attacking oriented. As for the teams that are working on the more counter attacking methods, it doesn't really matter whether you operate in the half space or not. The counter attack relies on making sure you pull as many opposition players from the opposition defense to come to midfield to assist, because you have such powerful midfielders who actually can intercept play, and you rely on this intercepting ability to catch them off guard before charging at a counter attack. So there are several ways of building up football and the tactics, and we have seen such wonders emerge in recent history, especially with a lot of clubs, Borussia Dortmund, and also what's this, um, PSG, we see a lot of players who actually are quite dangerous working in these half spaces, and it's pretty impressive. All right, now to get into football managers' tactics and how to implement them here. First off, you have to understand how certain players work, how positions work, and how many places there are that a player can be put onto the pitch. And this all starts with you understanding what your team is capable of. So what you got to do is you actually got to go to this team report. You got to go to the squad depth. And what you can do is click all positions, and you'll be able to understand where your teams can operate the best. And when you have this all positions open, you can see more obviously that there are exactly four, what do you call this, rows in between, right? There are four rows of players where they can be. And that means that the sides besides the goalkeepers automatically are operated by the players that are closest to them, and the players basically cover any area that is, one tile around them. Certain positions, however, requires the player to be more in a roaming role, and you can decide that if you have, what do you call this, a free, like an extra player available to be put in a certain position, especially in midfield. If you have an extra defensive midfielder, or you have an extra midfielder, or you have an extra attacking midfielder, any of these midfield players will be allowed to have a more roaming position, because you already have overloaded that side of the pitch with other players. So roaming players are essentially important on operating in half spaces because they have the ability to be the pivot for other players to find the pass. So if someone were to overload, for example, Mo Salah on the right wing, he will immediately be able to push the pass to Roberto Firmino, who I'm using as an attacking midfielder usually, or even Thiago, or maybe Jota, and he can use them as a pivot so that they can find the pass either back to midfield, to the left, or to the front. And the reason they don't want to really hold the ball here is because defenders are immediately charging at them. And if defenders stay away from this distraction and they don't want to be involved, this person can just find the goal. And this works even in the deeper side of the pitch where people try to play, or rather build up play from the back. And this is especially true for players like Jorginho, Paul Pogba, and even Thiago in his earlier days. Certain players like Xavi, I think even Xavi Hernandez actually operated in a deeper part of the pitch before he builds up to the midfield, and this is useful for them. Those people who know that they have very good forwards who have good first touch, who can bring the ball down easily, who have good hitting skills, who can run and beat offside traps. So they build up from the deeper parts of the pitch, and then they just find the pass forward. And this is an especially dangerous position if they are let to roam as well, because they will be able to find other places where they can get the pass out from. Even Kevin De Bruyne sort of operates as a deep lying playmaker, but sometimes he just pushes out to midfield because. Um, or rather pushes out to a more forward position because Manchester City generally operate higher up the pitch. So even though he's a deep lying playmaker, he just arrives later in the box. That's basically his style of play. It's something like what Henderson does. Henderson is actually a deep lying playmaker, but he arrives a little bit late in the box, and then he shows up already at the attacking midfield position when the team is actually pushing forward. So these are generally how you want to build up play. So once you have identified where your players can generally operate, or where you have the strongest players operating, you can start to decide whether you want to have more attacking midfielders, more midfielders, or more defensive midfielders. So in my particular tactic right now, I'm overloading the front with more attacking midfielders, and the reason I'm doing that is because I actually want my defenders to what do you call this, work a little bit slower than what they generally do. And in order to make sure that that is the case, you really want to make your midfielders either box to box or deep lying playmakers. And the description is can be seen down here as it says. The box to box basically is for both defending and attacking. They generally cover a wider area of the pitch. Deep lying playmakers basically they what do you call this? They build up play from the back. They win the ball deeper in the pitch, and then they push out forward by having good composure, having good passing, and these kinds of abilities. And more than often, they have the instruction known as hold position. And this instruction is what tells them that once they get the ball, they're going to stay in that area, and then they're going to find the pass, or they're going to find the what do you call this? The player that is running up furthest, and then try to get the assist in right away. So these are the general tactics that you have to understand when you're playing out from the back. If you want to use an advanced playmaker in midfield, then you generally need to have at least a defensive midfielder operating, because otherwise your midfielders will not be able to cover this particular area of the pitch. And while right now, as you can see, it is looking green because Van Dijk and Fabinho are both covering this area. This half space is still weak right now because Fabinho and Alexander Arnold both have to cover it, and Alexander Arnold is going to be finding himself overlapping in the higher areas of the pitch. And before he can run down back, Fabinho has to find cover for this area. So if I want Henderson to become an advanced playmaker on attack, this area will start to become weaker, and players can actually build in this half space and threaten Fabinho by outnumbering him 2-1. And then Van Dijk will have to pull to this side, and you know what happens then. Basically, this area is going to be weakened as well. So before you decide, unless you want to, sorry, for example, if you want to do the advanced playmaker here, all you have to do instead is put a defensive midfielder. So in my case, if I were to, kind of click this. Come on, let me click this FM. No, okay, there we go. So if I put a defensive midfielder here, I solve this problem. And of course, I have to put another midfielder here so that that area is resolved. Roberto Firmino is not very good in this side of the pitch. Okay, that's why it's red. Let me put someone who's actually good in that side of the pitch. Let me put Thiago. Thiago, you can operate here. So by doing this now, I can use an advanced playmaker in Henderson, and I can even use Thiago as an advanced playmaker, and then I can use a defensive midfielder to cover this area. And this is what Liverpool actually does. They use Fabinho as a defensive midfielder, and then they use two what do you call this, midfielders in the center of the pitch, but they use them both generally as a box to box, and that means they operate both offensively and defensively. While the defensive midfielder actually covers for the overlapping wingers by operating slightly wider to provide support cover for the defenders. And this is a more defensive tactic. For me, I rather push a little bit higher and just go for a more offensive tactic. But what happens is when I do this tactic, I have to make sure that my team doesn't hold the ball and build up from the back too long. So I use more a way of just increasing the tempo so that we just play out the ball a lot faster. And sometimes you want to play out from the back instead of just throwing the ball forward if you have shorter players, because your players just can't bring down the ball because they lose out to taller defenders. So this is another thing in tactics that you have to understand, is you really have to know what your players can or cannot do. So for example, if I know that Robertson, like, actually you can see a general height of the squad. Um, do we have it here? I think we have it somewhere. Squad. Okay, this is the depth. Overview. Strengths and weaknesses. Assistant report. I'm pretty sure we have the command of area. Okay. Nah, we don't seem to be having it here. Squad comparison. Uh, crap. I'm not sure if there is a way, but I remember seeing it somewhere. Anyway, ideally, you do need to check what your squad's average height is. And once you check their height, which is usually stated here, where is it? Is it here? No, 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 no. Let's go to the information. Actually, I think it should be in this page that we saw. I'm just not looking well enough. There we go. So the height is 178 for Diogo Jota, and for example, for like Van Dijk is 193. So when you have this height gap, you must understand that your forwards will not be able to receive a particular type of cross. And what type of crosses are those? You can actually check them here in the final third under in possession. So if you use floated crosses, this is very good if you know that your forwards are generally taller than the opposition defense or almost equal in height. So for example, if you're using someone like Robert Lewandowski, Peter Crouch, basically taller players in general, floated crosses are more ideal because they have the height advantage. So this is not a random thing. You don't simply just want to go mix crosses and then pray. Sometimes you want to find a specific type of player with a specific type of cross. So floated is probably better if you have taller players. If you have shorter players, but they're very fast, they love beating offside tracks like Mo Salah and all, low crosses is probably better for you. Whip crosses is a little bit more dangerous because what do you call this? The cross is very fast, and also it makes it very difficult for defenders to get the ball. But it also makes it difficult for your forwards to get the ball. And I have realized that both whipped and low give me a similar chance of getting goals in, just because my team operates with much shorter passing. But if you want to go with a much more direct style of passing, then perhaps lower crosses are better because you generally just want to get as many crosses in as possible. But in my case, I don't mind going for whip crosses because I don't get that many crosses in. Despite having great crossing wingbacks, I generally reduce the number of crosses I get into the game because I want to use a much shorter style of passing, and I find more success in this method. Also, you must understand that this affects the intensity of the game in certain ways. You want to reduce as much injuries as you can. And the weakness of Gegenpress, for example, is the very, very high intensity gameplay. And what this does is it creates this. Okay, it gives you the unfortunate set of injuries onto some of my best, even my poor, what do you call this? Wonder kids are injured. Like, come on. And then my only cover for Robertson is injured as well. So I'm going to bring in some new wingbacks. Okay, guys, I'm bringing in a bunch of cover, and we are lacking depth severely because of the fact that these injuries keep stockpiling. And this is exactly what happens in real life. And players are injury prone. Trust me, I checked it. I've gone to my squad. I actually have the eyes of Osiris. Basically I can check hidden attributes of players, and I checked who is the most injury prone player. And right now is Thiago, Matip, Naby Keita, and Joe Gomez. And out of all these players, I'm perfectly operating these players without much injuries. And the reason these players are fine compared to a lot of the younger players is because I've been using these players in positions that, like Mo Salah and Mane, that require a lot of strength. And when they do get knocks and whatever, strength is basically your resistance. And if you don't have sufficient, there we go, strength. So if we don't have sufficient amount of strength and fitness and these kinds of things, you basically are going to get a bunch of knocks and you're going to end up with injuries, and it is just not good. As you can see, Harvey Elliott just does not have the strength or fitness that I would ideally like to have. Actually, you know what? Let's just push this to strength. Jumping reach, where's the... Yeah, strength is the only thing you can improve. You can't improve natural fitness. It's just something that they have to improve as the fitness coach, utilizes them. And same goes for Curtis Jones. While he has slightly higher natural fitness and strength, it was just unfortunate that I had to encounter a situation where someone just, knocked the crap out of him, and he ended up with an injury as well. So when you're using particular styles, you have to also understand that. This thing can affect your players with injuries. So you may want to reduce your intensity if you feel that your players are getting very, very injured and you don't really want to put too much of pressure on them. And while the reduced intensity just does reduce the number of injuries, your players aren't going to be able to move that fast on the pitch just because they're going to be a lot slower and feel sluggish. And I mean, this is the attacking style of play, right? You could go for the Leicester style or even Mourinho's Chelsea style, where he likes to build from the back, be more defensive, lose out on possession generally, but then find the counter attack. And that one, uses very little intensity, It has very little injuries, which is why he used to have a lot of players that can play throughout the entire season. Like I think Didier Drogba was a player that played for like a crazy number of seasons with absolutely no injuries. And yeah, I mean those tactics are pretty crazy. You know, they take care of the players, they win matches, and they may seem a little bit dirty. You know, like what the hell you're parking the bus, but for some reason the tactic wins. And while it's frustrating for people who watch it, on paper it's doing well. And hey, some people just want to get the win. You know, no matter what it takes. Okay, so back to the selection of player tactics. Let's say I want my wing back. So there's these two things, right? For defenders, you have wingbacks and fullbacks. No nonsense fullbacks, complete wingbacks, and inverted wingbacks. Now, all of these things, right, will have a specific selection of attributes. And the easiest way to see this is to select the player themselves, and then you select the position that you want to work on. For example, the left defender position, and you can click here to see which attributes are being selected. This is how you know where the player can be best at. Another way where you can find out where the player will, like just out of like a quick way of finding out where they would operate best at is you go to squad. You gotta get this particular view. I've created it, but you can create it by yourself. It's not a hidden thing or anything. You can just add the column here. You can insert the column through training and whatever. And what you got to do is you got to select assistant manager's opinion of this player's best tactic duty, assistant manager's opinion of this player's best position, and then you can select the position, role, and duty selection. And this will allow you to just change this while reviewing what the assistant manager thinks is very good. And this goes back to how good your assistant manager is in judging player ability. Okay, so let's say you have a staff. Like in my case, I have Linders. I'm not sure how to pronounce this, guys. I'm not gonna say it's. I know this is Linders, and Mr. Linders here has the 12 in judging player ability, which is pretty crap. He's very good in judging player potential, and this is good when he wants to recommend a player. But when he wants to see what the player can currently do, he is pretty bad. And you can alternatively, just get a better assistant manager, which I'll be doing pretty soon. Okay, I'm gonna sack this guy. It's just a matter of time. But right now, because I can decide things for myself, I don't rely on it too much. But if you have a very good assistant manager with good player judging ability, as long as it's green, it doesn't have to be a 19 or 20 or 18 or anything. If it's 15 or even 14 is pretty good. You can already see these things will be a lot more accurate because they will be more accurate to the stats of the player. And this way, you can quickly decide if a player should, for example, Joel Matip should be a ball playing defender in a defender center role. And there's two ways you can customize the focus of their training. One is you specifically select defender center, ball playing defender, and then as you can see, is better in a defend role. You can select this. Or you can just leave him in the playing position and he will be trained to cover all of the defender center positions, which is also pretty good just in case you want to change your tactics in the future. Where you will struggle is if the player can operate in more than one particular position on the pitch. While you can cover all the roles, like for example, in a defender center, our guy can cover all of these roles, right? um, they may what do you call this, be able to operate on two areas. For example, if like I'm getting one particular player here, where is he? That's James Justin. So James Justin will provide me cover for both injuries on Alexander Arnold and Robertson's side, because he can play both on the right and left wing. He's pretty insane, right? He's a right footer. He can operate on both sides of the wing. And while he doesn't have, he's already at like 2.5 star, and he's 22 years old. By the time he's like 27, 28, he's probably going to operate at four star, maybe 4.5. He'll be one of the best defenders in the game, basically. And he has excellent stats. He has good marking, good hitting. But anyway, enough about that. Basically, the idea is that this kind of player can't specifically be developed at one side of the pitch. And the reason because is that he can play on both sides. So what you gotta do is you have to want to train him periodically every now and then on one side, and then change his training to the other side, and also play him on the other side of the pitch so that he can develop as a player on that side. And so that means on the right side, he's going to be playing on the with the right foot. So you want to use him as a wingback or a fullback on attack. And on the left side, you want to use him as either an inverted wingback or a fullback as well. The advantage of selecting the fullback position by itself is the fact that it doesn't care which foot you're using because it doesn't focus as much on crossing as a wingback does. A wingback ideally is always rushing forward to find crosses. They have specific instructions. Can I see them here? No, I can't. Okay, let me go back to my tactics to show you what they do. So for example, if I were to select a wingback attack, you will end up with all of these instructions. Dribble more, run wide with the ball, cross more often, cross from the byline. What is the byline? This is the byline. The end of the, what do you call this? Pitch area. And they cross from the byline. What do you call this? They even have the get further forward even after getting the run wide with ball. So they basically are trying to get as many runs out as possible. And the reason I'm not using Robertson as a wingback is because I feel that Mane and Salah already cover these roles reasonably well. So what I do is I leave it in automatic, and what automatic does, it only increases the run wide with ball. What do you call this? Only adds this instruction, and how this plays slightly better than the attack is it doesn't force him to rush out as much, and it also allows him to decide whether he wants to go into a defensive role, which is take fewer risks and cross from deep, and the support role, which is get further forward. So the defense role, cross from deep and run wide with ball and also take fewer risks, could operate better when you know that the opposition is pressing a lot harder or rather very high up the pitch. So what you want to do is you want to put automatic for certain roles like these and let the players decide for themselves. And how the player decides is determined by their decisions. As you can see, it is already highlighted here. Normally, any role that you select automatic for, you don't have one for ball playing defender, but the wingbacks you always have the automatic. I don't think. Do they have one for the winger? No, I don't think so. Yeah, I generally see the defenders having the automatic option, but I don't see it for a lot of other roles. Let me see if. Oh, there we go. Central midfielder has the automatic. There we go, central midfielder. So if I were to select automatic for a central midfielder, it's very, very important that their decisions are pretty good. And just to compare the difference between the central midfielder on automatic, for example, with the attack, as you can see, the automatic uses a lot of concentration. The central midfielder attack uses long shots and acceleration. The support uses concentration as well. The defense uses aggression, marking, and passing. So automatic is good because the player will decide when to use specific roles. And while it doesn't highlight those ability, they actually use them. They do use aggression, they do use tackling, and they do use marking if you leave them in an automatic position. So these are things that you have to study. You have to scroll through what these are to know the skills that will be used by the player. And this goes regardless of what you select. For example, if I select Carrilero support, but Henderson is chasing, or rather, you know what, let's not pick this. Let's pick Mazzella attack. Okay, let's pick Mazzella attack. So if I pick Mazzella attack, it's a more offensive role. The player will be rushing forward to try to get more long shots, and they'll be doing less tackling in general. But this does not mean that Henderson is not going to tackle. He will tackle a player still, maybe even higher up the pitch to get the ball if he's in the right situation, because that's a choice that the player themselves will make. So this is just a chance. And if the player decides to do it, the tackling stat is still going to come into play. So even if you select a role that doesn't highlight it, they will still use it. But the role itself just emphasizes on how they play and what is the focus stat. It just tells you what is the more important stat. It doesn't mean that they are not going to use it. So all players, for example, will always use things like teamwork, positioning, leadership, fitness, pace, strength, stamina, all these things, especially the physical stats, they are important for all players in general. So when I scout out players, I select certain things in general like stamina, natural fitness. I select teamwork and leadership. And the reason I select these specific stats is not just for my tactics, but because of the fact that you cannot develop them or you cannot train them. So, for example, if I want to train leadership, as you can see, it is not in a focus here. So, if the player doesn't have natural leadership, they're never going to end up taking a leadership course and you can never develop that particular stat. Also, natural fitness is not something that you can train. You can train stamina, you can train work rate, you can train what do you call this? Strength, jumping reach. You can train off the ball. Yeah, you can even train decision making, but you cannot train certain things like flair. I don't think you can train flair. Yes, you cannot. You cannot train flair. You cannot train natural fitness. You cannot train leadership. So these skills generally you want to look for when you find players, because you can't train them for it. And when you select a player to play in a particular position, understand that all these things will always come into play. So if you have a player with those stats being weaker, then you want to have a player that actually has those stats a lot higher paired with them, so that they can operate better on that position in the pitch. Don't leave them in a role alone. Like for example, if I wanted a like for example Salah on the right wing, and Salah doesn't have very good leadership, but he has pretty good teamwork. He has decent teamwork. He's 14 teamwork. He's very good natural fitness, and his positioning may not be so good, but his decision making is pretty decent, and this allows him to operate pretty solo by himself. Actually, I could even leave him without an overlapping wing back, and he will do pretty well. But if your teamwork is, for example, also a 9, and your fitness is really bad, this player is really going to struggle in that position. And what you want to do is ideally move them to a more, maybe a secondary attacking midfielder position, maybe operate here together with another person here. And this will resolve problems. We kind of move him here. There we go. And this will resolve the need for the player to have leadership issues and whatever, because they're too far off to one side of the pitch, and they're just not going to be able to communicate well. They're not going to make decisions very well, and those sorts of things. So they changed to winger, huh? I think it's because of my Gegenpress setting. Anyway, let's just put them back in inside forward attack. So, and also, okay, so once we have realized that, for example, central midfielder automatic has these stats, right? Let's select box to box and see the difference. So the real difference between the central midfielder position and the box to box is the fact that the box to box already covers a lot of the central midfielder positions and even some more. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you go to attack and you go to box, you see more stats are being added, and the only thing ideally being removed, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see what's being removed. Vision is being removed. And let's say here I go to support. Okay, now we have vision selected, and these have acceleration, balance, aggression, all of these things. And if here we go to defense, this is acceleration, marking, passing, dribbling, finishing, first touch. So the central midfielder, what do you call this? Doesn't cover certain things that box to box does. Box to box has dribbling, finishing as well. It basically does a lot of other abilities because it's just a more powerful, more roaming role. But in order for the player to be a better box to box midfielder compared to the central midfield position, the main thing you got to know is the player has to have good movement. And if you roll these through as I'm doing now, you can see that the only stat that is selected is acceleration, and only when they're in an attacking position. But a box to box midfielder has to have good acceleration, good balance, good pace, good stamina, good strength. And the reason they got to do that is because they'll be moving around the pitch a lot, challenging players, winning the ball back, finding passes. And that's what makes box to box a more commanding role in midfield. And you do only want to have box to box midfielders if you have either an attacking or a defensive midfielder, because Box-to-box midfielders are always roaming, so you can't do a central single defender or a single striker or anything like that, and not have a holding midfielder if you have a lot of box-to-box. The reason these two box-to-box midfielders are operating side to side is because there's two of them, first of all. And also, I have plenty of coverage around them, so I'm not too afraid. But if you have, for example, like two strikers, and you are probably having wing midfielders, or those sorts of things. And maybe you only have like maybe you're having attacking midfielder, one single defender here, or maybe something like that. Box to box is not really ideal because you may not get as much coverage. But with the tactic that I have here, I already have plenty of areas of the pitch covered reasonably well. So that's another thing that you should look at. So always remember that it's not exactly the stats that are being highlighted, but whether your player has these stats in general, and they have to have these stats really well, and you want to put them in positions that utilize certain stats. So for example, I know that Salah has a lot of flair, and I know that he has very good dribbling skill. So it would be a waste, for example, if I put him as a where is it, winger support, no, another one. There we go, white target man. So if I put him at a white target man, basically it's a role that just receives the ball and rushes into score. And this is good, as it says, for like just balls coming from the back, and he just receives the ball and just, what do you call this, holds onto it until his overlapping fullbacks can come in, or his strikers can come in, and he just tries to get the ball in using a cross, or finds a way to finish it himself. This is not a very good role for Salah because he doesn't utilize his dribbling skills and his flair very much. So putting him in an attacking advanced playmaker role or an inside forward role utilizes certain skills a little bit better, to just make him play better in general. It does not mean that he can't play in the other role. It's just the way you use them. Of course, you can experiment. You can have fun by mixing the roles and seeing how your players operate. But it also takes time for your players to get used to specific roles, and within that time, a lot of things can change. Like maybe they're just not comfortable playing in that role and they start complaining to you. So there are certain ways that it can change. Oh yeah, let me go to the stopper. There we go. Fabinho stopper, a ball playing defender defend. Actually, you know what? I think I don't mind keeping him in defend. Yeah, take more risks, hold position. I think that's fine. The Fabinho has a trait actually. He has this trait that says brings ball out of defense. Yeah, he has this trait. So it is good for a ball playing defender to have this trait. A center defender says dribble less. It is not likely his style because as it says here, it affects the brings ball out of defense. So you want to make sure you also steer clear of certain traits that a player has. So this is another thing that I want to go to now. So, for example, if you have a player like Alexander Arnold has certain things you have developed him into, or he has, or he shows up with certain traits. For example, he has a trait that says, runs with ball down the right, gets further forward whenever possible, tries long range free kicks. So when you have traits like these, you don't want to put him in a position that doesn't use these traits. And there are certain positions that will counter these traits. For example, if I put him on the left wing, it doesn't work that well because he's not gonna be able to run down the right side of the pitch, right? And what you can do to solve this problem, let's say you do want him to operate on the left side of the pitch as an inverted wing back, is you can actually discuss to any one of your managers or your trainers. I'm gonna say his movement to I think it's this one. Okay, let's do this. There we go. There we go. So we will remove the runs with ball down the right. Okay. So by removing this trait, we'll be able to operate him in other areas of the pitch a little better because he doesn't have this trait and it will not affect his style of play. However, this also means that the player is generally going to reduce doing this as a habit. And does that mean he's not going to run down the pitch? No, he is going to, but it just reduces the chances of him wanting to do it in the first place. But I'm not really worried about this trade because he already has the gets forward whenever possible. He also has tried to switch the ball to wide areas. So these two traits already make him a good right wing back. And perhaps I could add another trait for him, which is I think Robertson has that trait. Uh, Yeah, runs with ball often. Yeah, there we go. So if you have the gets forward whenever possible and runs with ball often, if you have these two traits, it's actually pretty good. So he already has gets forward whenever possible. If you just have runs with ball more often, he's already going to just run regardless of which wing he's operating on. So some of these traits are bad in general. It's just the way the game works. But it is very good if you are keeping a player in particular position and not planning to switch them anywhere. I would still like to remove this, um, just because Alexander Arnold could also operate in a midfield position in the future. Like, I'm not kidding. He's actually quite capable. Like, if I put him here, right? And I put him in, for example, box to box. As you can see, he's going to utilize a lot of his stats, which are pretty insane. The only stat that I will not be using very well is his crossing, which is a really, really powerful stat that he has. He can even operate on the right midfield side of the pitch as a winger, and it's pretty scary what he can do, what he's capable of. So, yeah, anyway, just a little bit of the player stats and also a bit of the player traits. These are things that you have to take note of. So understanding your team is very, very important in selecting a team. And of course, when you start off the game, it's not going to be that difficult because you already have the players in specific positions and you know how they operate. And you may have just seen them play in general and you know a little bit of the basics. But for you to go more in depth into how to select these players, you have to study their traits, you have to study their attributes, and then you also have to pick a play style. So, as for the way Jurgen Klopp handled Liverpool before I took charge in this game, uh, he actually uses Robertson as a fullback. And he's slightly more defensive. And he uses Alexander Arnold as a slightly more aggressive fullback. And what he does is this thing, focus play down the right. This means that our players will be pushing play down the right as much as possible and not so much on the left. And while this is nice and all, it's not very, like, realistically, this is very probable, right? And the reason this is very probable realistically is because you have a lot of right wingers, just naturally in general, because you have a lot of right footers more so than left footers. This is the reason why it is very difficult to find a left wing back in the game. And I know this as a fact because I'm a left-footed player. I used to play in the left wing in in college and whatever. I used to play left wing back. I used to play left winger, and not so much as an inside forward. Because my crosses were pretty decent, okay, if I say so myself. But and also I'm physically not very strong. That's the reason I couldn't operate as an inside forward, because an inside forward really has to have the ability to challenge the opposition defense, and I wasn't very good at that. But as I was pretty good at shutting down players, so I could still operate as a wing back, so I could get to them before they run to the actual defenders, and I could get my crosses in the wing because I was pretty good at that. But anyway, the what do you call this? The way the position itself works, you want to understand here. Wait, let me show you the tactics. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, let me just check this. Okay, sorry, I had a message there. All right, so you want to make sure that you have a player that can operate very well in the left wing that is left-footed, and these are rare. And Salah is a left-footed player. He's being used as an inside forward so that he can run in and score with his left foot. But what Jurgen Klopp does is he knows that he has a stronger right wing player with a right foot. So he pushes Alexander Arnold to be more on the offense, and he knows that Robertson operates better in defense and not so much in the offense, so he forces him to stay back. And what Liverpool does is that they basically will push Van Dijk to be in a more central defense role and Robertson to be in this sort of three-man formation when Alexander Arnold pushes up really high up the pitch. And Salah will generally be operating here. Alexander Arnold will be here. Fabinho is going to be here, and then we're going to have Henderson and Milner just generally pressing this side up the pitch, and this is how Liverpool does their original attack. But in my case, I'm not really bothered by that particular tactic. I want my players to have the ability to, or rather the ability to operate on both sides, regardless of what do you call this? Their pros and cons. Because I feel that Robertson actually has a pretty decent crossing as well. Look at that, that's 17, right? So he's just as good at crossing as Trent is. And by the way, I'm using an updated database. Just in case you guys want to know, I'll probably add the link in the description. But I've made a video about this previously. I've updated my database, so my player potential abilities have also updated, and certain players have increased potential because we realize that they're actually better than they usually were, and certain players have lost potential because they just aren't as good. So yeah, I like these updates. I feel that FM should do the updates by themselves actually, but you know what? It's fine. It's whatever. It's fine. So let me just put these two back in the wing back automatic. Actually, you know what? If I put them in attack, mm, yeah, I'll just put them back in attack. All right. So let me just set these back before I move on. I should probably just edit my tactics all together, just to make sure that these are saved. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this. Save. Cloud, Ruben Press, save. There we go. There we go. All right, so I've saved it. So yeah, now this is my Ruben press style. Okay. So anyway, yes. So you have to make sure that you understand how the players will rotate offensively and defensively when selecting certain players. Also, whether you have a good option of left-footed players. And as I said, left wing backs are very rare because of the fact that we don't have many left-footed players. Therefore, getting a left wing back that is as good as Robertson is really difficult. You can get right-footed players and use them as inverted wing backs, but it's not ideal. Ideally, you just want to find a left wing back, even though they are what do you call this, potential is not very good. You don't really have much of a choice sometimes. You just want to find the player and just stick them in there. But yeah, you can change tactics to say that you want to operate in a particular side of the pitch, left or right. That is up to you. But my advice is just try to push on both sides if you can, and that's probably going to be better for your team because you will just create more chances in general. Also, operating too much on one side of the pitch will generally tire out certain players, therefore, meaning that you need to increase the amount of depth you have on that particular side. So, aside from Trent, you also need, for example, Nico Williams. You may need you can even train Joe Gomez to operate on the right wing. I believe Fabinho can also operate on the right wing. So, yeah, there are a lot of players that you can retrain to operate on a particular side of the pitch just to add more depth to it so that you can have more cover in case there are more injuries. And you want to reduce injuries as much as you can. And how you want to do that is you basically want to filter by match load. And this is something I generally do in my games, which is the moment I see that the match load of a particular player is heavy, I don't play them. I switch out another player to play instead, and this is the way you can reduce injuries. And this is the best way actually that you can reduce injuries. Another good way that you can reduce injuries is to make sure that in your training settings, the when the player is in excellent health quality, you put it in normal intensity instead of double. All right. If you put in double intensity, the player will train a lot harder and improve a lot faster. All right. Their attributes go up faster. They will gain certain traits faster, lose certain traits faster. They will improve faster, but you increase the chance of injuries. So if you don't already know, what you should do when you start the season is you should go with half intensity on poor. These are fine. These are normal intensities, fine, because you don't really use them to play. But in the highest when they're at highest health condition, you want to set this to normal and not double intensity. This is very important. You want to put them in double intensity when you're during preseason, during when you don't have a double game week. Liverpool always has a double game week, right? Because they play so many matches. So every week they have an in-between match, as you can see. So because of this, you're going to risk even more injuries out of them. So you just want to keep this at normal intensity. Then you want to highlight all your players just use Control A and you'll highlight all your players, and then you click automatic, and that will follow your settings over here. And then you want to click set to physio intensity. And what the physio does is the physio may set a double intensity for certain players. So this is good also because some physios may recommend players to increase their intensity based on the trainings that they have, and also because certain players can further their potential. And this is very obvious. Okay, I'm not bullshitting you. For example, James Milner and Jordan Henderson, and for example, Mo Salah in this case, these three players have already hit their peak, right? And some of them are losing their peak as time goes on. So especially Milner and Henderson, they can't really be improved, and the physio knows that. So what the physio does is they just leave them at normal intensity and not at double intensity because they don't want to overwork the player. Okay, so when you allow this setting to take place, right? When you allow this setting to take place, you want to make sure that if the player is being played in the tactics here, you don't select a player that is at a high risk of injury and has a high match load. So you can put them as subs. You can rotate them in as cover, as like a substitute play, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That's fine, but allowing them to play a 90 minutes game is going to severely increase the risk of injury, and that's more than likely the case. Okay, so now that I've explained to you the gist of the tactics, how to select your player roles, how to read their attributes, how to read their what do you call this, um, their development, and to make sure that they have the right traits. After all of this, you see this line that is drawn here, right? This line is basically known as partnership. Okay, and how partnership works is let's go here. There we go. Partnerships. So when he plays in a particular role, he creates this partnership. So, for example, you can select a player like Henderson and know that Henderson has a strong partnership with Fabinho. And how to certain players will come with this partnership because they've already played in a particular tactic for a long time. Oh crap! Actually, you know what? Henderson is yellow carded. Oh, okay. Never mind. At least I have Kamavinga here. I already wanted to remove Milner actually, but looks like I may need to put Milner with Kamavinga because Henderson just can't. Prefers to be on the left. Okay. And Kamavinga has no preference, right? Or prefers to be in the left. You know what? I'll leave you on the left. Yeah, I think Milner cannot. Milner is the Swiss knife man. Oh man, this guy also has a yellow card. Really, you guys have yellow cards in Premier League? But I know Kamavinga has a lot of yellow cards because he's pretty aggressive with his tackling, and so I actually have to set this stay on feet. Yeah, I want to reduce the number of yellow cards my players get. Um, I think the rest of these are pretty straightforward. I don't meddle with the dribbling. I don't meddle with creative freedom. You can, if you want to, and see the difference. It's totally up to you. But what you can do is generally switch this tactic during play. For example, if you're winning a game, you can select be more expressive. If you're losing a game, select be more disciplined. And that way, players will generally follow a specific tactic or not, in a more strictly or less strictly manner. It's up to you. Dribble less is good if your players suck at dribbling, and run at defense is good if your players are faster. Just these kinds of things to know in general, but most importantly, it's all about understanding your players, what they're strong at, and what they lack. So these things are very important. So you know what? Since Kamavinga is in heavy match load, I probably should not play him. Let's remove Matip as well. So let's just select my players, and let me show you a match here. Salamane, okay. Konate. You know what? Let me filter by the potential. There we go. Okay. Firmino. Firmino's doing okay. I should probably put him here just to show you guys what he's capable of. He's quite terrifying. Thiago can operate in midfield, but he does slightly better as you can see, deep lying playmaker or an advanced playmaker. This is where he's strongest. So I put him in attacking midfield role. But he can play box to box. It's just like he loses out on certain things, right? Like he can't use his flair. Advanced playmaker support. Advanced playmaker attack allows him to dribble more. But it'll put some weakness here. You know what? I will keep him as a sub. Let's see. Curtis. No, 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 no. Okay. You know what? I also got to filter out the injured players. There we go. And there we go. Okay, cool. Naby Keita is high on risk. Leighton Clarkson actually might be interesting to add to this fray. Callagher. I'm actually trying to transfer Callagher out. I mean, yeah, it's just unfortunate that I have to. Because Allison is just so strong, and Callagher is not going to be able to keep up with the likes of them. And Adrian is always delighted to just be a backup keeper, so it's just so nice to have Adrian around instead. Nico Williams, and I'm also transferring. No, you know what? You know what? Yeah, I'm supposed to transfer Minamino, but I didn't get many offers for him, so yeah, I didn't get many offers for him, so I might even use him because he's actually a pretty decent player. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Who can I swap Minamino with? Henderson can't because he's on yellow. So Minamino has to come in. Kelleher is taking an extra slot, I think. Yeah, that's okay. All right, so now that we select our, so this is my view when I select my players. In case you guys haven't seen it before, this is what my view looks like. So I have the position role duty, I have the condition, and the reason because is when you hover over this, it'll tell you if they're tired or not. And this is basically enough for you to read through everything. But sometimes I like to keep the match load and the injury risk also just in case, just to see what's happening. You may not need the match load if you have the injury risk because generally injury risk is more important than match load. They can have really high match load, but if they have low injury risk, it's fine. But that's not likely possible. Like for example, you can have medium match load with low risk, but I have not really seen a heavy match load with a low risk. So this is something that you can keep or not keep. It's totally up to you. And then, of course, the player, then the overall happiness. This is something I look at. And if the player is not very happy, I play them more often so that they get happier. But if I'm going to transfer a player out like Callagher, I'm just going to keep him unhappy. I don't really care. This is the last match rating, which is something you can look at. But for me, the more important thing is the training rating. So if they perform really well in training, I do want to give them a chance, even if they're under 23s. Sometimes I give them a chance just because their training rating is so high, like 9, 10 sometimes. Like look at Allison, it's crazy. That is a pretty insane rating. All right. And then the age is just something that you can look at. So potential ability is a hidden stat. If you don't have the editor, you can't see this. I don't use the editor for anything else besides this thing. But the editor is pretty powerful. It can spoil the game for you if you know too much, but I think just knowing the potential is not really a big deal. But if you edit things like your budget and stuff, that's pretty broken. Okay, that's just too broken for eddies for me. I can't play if the game is that broken. All right, so let's sort out this tactic. Let's see. Thiago is probably still the better player to operate in midfield. Um, let's see. Advanced playmaker attack. Hmm. Hmm. Leighton Clarkson is also another option. Box to box. There we go. Leighton Clarkson is also another option for me. So I think this would be pretty good. So we have box to box, advanced playmaker attack. The attack role is just dribbles more, and Firmino's dribbling is pretty good. So I think it's fine. The reason I'm keeping Fabinho in defense is because I'm actually training him to play as a what do you call this ball playing defender. But I realized that Liverpool has purchased Ibrahim Konate, and they also have Ben Davis. Ben Davis is not as good as Konate, but they're both good players in their own right. Ben Davis could be better than he could be better than Matip. Matip is not very good actually. So Ben Davies might be better than Matip, but Joe Gomez and Ibrahim Konate are ideally the best people to pair with Van Dijk. Van Dijk is insane, right? So these two are generally better. But Fabinho, of course, is better than all Gomez, Konate, Matip, Ben Davies. Fabinho is basically the best person to grow together with Van Dijk. So I want to create this because I don't use a defensive midfielder. That's the only reason it works this way. So let's just save the game up in case we surprisingly lose to who's this? Brighton. Yeah, if we ever lose to Brighton, that'll be pretty scary. Let's proceed to the match. So this is just a good thing to know if your players are pretty pleased. If they're not really pleased, just screw them. Sometimes when you create a new tactic, players are not going to be pleased about it, and just unfortunately the way it works. So yeah, that's another thing. All right. So here we go. You have all of these social things. I like these. These are always pretty cool to read. Sometimes reading them helps me with my mood as well. I want you to pick up. I generally just go for the recommended thing. Otherwise, I'll tell them something more generic sometimes. There are certain things I want to see a good performance. Those things are just more generic. Let's go to kickoff. So the moment kickoff starts is when I make certain changes, right? The moment kickoff starts, I pause it. And the reason I do it upon kickoff is because sometimes the opposition's lineup is not properly decided and certain things can change. For example, as you can see, Neil Maupay and Alexis McAllister are right now not selected. They're in subs, right? And although they're in subs, you do want to make sure that you set certain things preemptively. So I'm going to select the striker and attacking midfielders. If there are no attacking midfielders, I don't do this. But if they're attacking midfielders, I'll do it. For example, if they're deep midfielders, I just look if they have most assists and most goals, and I do this. So first thing you want to do is you want to increase your pressing intensity. You want to make sure you always press these people, right? Because they are really a threat. You want to make your tackling hard and you want to stow on the weaker foot. And tackling hard is okay if your tactics is set to make sure that you stay on feet. Okay, this is important. If you set tackling hard and you say, get stuck in, meaning dive into tackles, you can get a lot of fouls, and you don't want your players to be fully yellow carded on the pitch. So if you have get stuck in, you may want to go easy or normal, right? And that may be a better tactic. But for me, I'm gonna stay on foot, and then tackle hard, and that way you reduce the number of fouls, but you also increase your chance of winning back possession. The next thing you want to do is you don't really want to tightly mark the attacking midfielders, but you do want to tightly mark the forwards. So Florian Andoni is the striker right now, but Neil Maupay may come in later, so I'm going to make sure that these people are tightly marked. As for my team's players, I keep Fabinho in a more of a stopper role actually. So the basic the difference between the defender and stopper role is the defender is going to hold position, the stopper is going to run out a little more and not really hold his position. There's also the cover role, which is basically they stay in a more defensive midfielder role, but I feel that stopper is slightly better. So actually, I should change my tactic for that. But Van Dijk, what I do is I tell him to hold his position, but he is going to mark the deepest, or rather the most forward striker. And in my case right now, let's just set mark specific position, striker center. Let's do this. Yeah. And if there is a striker center, he's going to make sure he marks that position. You have to check this thing in case they have two strikers, right? And you have to decide who you want to mark. And don't get both of your defenders to mark two strikers. That's a horrible idea, because if they're drawn away by those strikers, for example, if they're deep lying forwards, and if your defenders get drawn away, then the attacking midfielders will score a goal. That's basically what's going to happen. As for the set piece takers, I do not select them before the game. I come into the game and I just quick pick them. And I find this easier because if you do it before the game, you got to come in and you got to like remove them one by one. And there's no way to remove all or auto all. That option is not being given yet, unfortunately. But you can come into the game and you can just click auto, and they'll all do this. And certain players you don't want to put them in corners. Like for example, you don't want Mo Salah taking a corner because you want him to be in the penalty box so that he has a chance of scoring the goal. And Raul Moro as well. I don't want him in a corner. And as for the free kicks are fine. You want your shorter players like Mo Salah taking free kicks. Throw-ins, I think these are pretty straightforward. You just don't want any offensive attacking threat to be in the throw-in. So yeah, I think these are fine. So let's just confirm these changes. So these are the changes I make when the game starts right away. And once these are done, they will take effect as soon as the game continues, right? And the game is continuing, so the changes have already taken effect. Over here, I use the director camera. I set to key highlights only. This is whatever, it's totally up to you. But I generally set to key highlights and I go to the slightly faster match speed. And for me, this is the ideal setting. I'm so super comfortable with it. You can do whatever you want, but my suggestion is don't do um, the only commentary and try not to do um, like you can do extended highlights. That's pretty okay. But only commentary is very difficult for you to control your team, and to make tactical changes is really tricky. So that's something. Right, so the game has started. Let's see how we fare. As Layden Clarkson, my new youth academy kid, who I've brought to the first team. And we're pretty much on the offense right now. As you can see, Robertson is operating as an overlapping fullback, rather overlapping wingback. He's very high up the pitch. And as a result, my midfielders who are box to box have to provide cover for him. Here comes Sadio Mane on the counter attack, passing to Jota, and there's a goal. So, although Mane is not supposed to operate on that side of the pitch, he naturally goes there because that is the position he took during the corner. Oh yeah, and this is another thing. You can actually set. Oh my God, Salah's injured. You can actually set certain things, like in a corner, right? In set pieces in a corner, you can select during the defense and attack scenario the angle of right or left, and you can actually decide where specific players are going to be. So for example, I can click the attacking midfield left, or the like the striker. I want the striker to wait during a defensive corner. I can also tell my attacking midfield left to be on a slightly higher part of the pitch. I can actually move him, I think, right? Oh, this is the highest. Oh, okay, so this is the highest. So on the other side, the left and right position, you can also switch them out and see who you want to keep further out. And the only difference you really want to look at here, right, is between Salah and Mane. Um, where is it? You want to see who has better acceleration. So Mane has 18 acceleration. Salah has 18 as well. Oh, I guess they both have equal acceleration. Salah has 15 passing, 15 strength, 16 anticipation. Yeah, Mane is better to receive the ball if it ever pours out during a corner, and to push it to the striker. So yeah, this is actually pretty good, pretty interesting. Something you guys have to take note of. For example, if I want Salah to be here instead, Salah has got better pace, better agility, better acceleration. He's actually better to operate as a receiving forward than Diogo Jota. And also another reason is Jota is actually a shadow striker for me. He's a deep lying forward sort of, but I use him as a shadow striker because I feel the shadow striker role is slightly better than the deep lying forward. But yeah, so I should actually change these out. Probably I should make this tactical change later as well. And this should work on both sides of the pitch. Basically, I'm going to swap Salah out with Jota, and that way, if Salah receives the ball, he's a much more powerful counter-attacking threat. And there we go. The instruction is stay forward, right? It's going to be the player instruction for him. And player instruction, edge of area. There we go. Let's do that. Yeah, there we go. Edge of area. And let's see. Jota is go back, player instruction. Uh, if I set this to edge of area, he's also gonna wait in the same position. Yeah, not ideal. Left and the right. Let's see. So this is Sadio Mane. 18, 16, 18, 16, 16. Hmm. Yeah, I think this is better. Yeah, this is slightly better. So these are changes that you can make. It's totally up to you how you want to do it. But you can make these changes before or during play. Ideally before, because these things will stay permanent throughout. But the set piece takers is something I advise you to do during play. And why do I see 2 injuries? Are you serious? That's horrible. That is absolutely horrible. Oh my god. Anyway, it's a good thing I have cover, but that is absolutely horrible. Wow. Oh god, let's just confirm these changes and see. 2 injuries in 18 minutes. And they almost happen like side by side. Did they like run into each other or something? That would be hilarious. You can probably see that in like the full match highlights. Maybe they run into each other and that's how they get injured. So that's another thing. Okay, there we go. We are back in play with some new subs. We'll see how well they fare. They're not as good as the originals, of course. But I do believe that it's more important to preserve our injured forwards, who are so good, by the way. Uh, okay. Anyway, let's just. I think we're still doing okay. We have plenty of cover. I could even switch play to the left side of the pitch now that I know that the right side of the pitch is weaker. So like now that I know that what do you call this? Minamino is not that strong compared to Mane. What I can do is focus play down the left, and that way we reduce the pressure on Minamino, but we don't use Trent as well. So what we can do is we add an instruction to Trent, which is um, aim crosses at the far post. There we go. Yeah, we do this. So by doing this, he will increase the crosses to Sadio Mane, and Sadio Mane will shoot more often, and uh, roam from position. No, no, I need him to hold the position. Cut inside with ball. Yeah, this is what I need. And Robertson is going to aim crosses at the near post, the center. I think all of his existing instructions are actually good enough. So let's just see how this little tactical change makes it, whether it makes a difference. We got Van Dijk on a yellow card as well, so we have to be a little bit careful. Let's just tell him to ease off the tackles and instead give him the mark tighter role. And we gotta tell Fabinho to also stay back a little bit because I have a feeling this might go south. We only have one goal at halftime, and we have lost two of our best forwards. So this is not ideal. So I'm going to say things are going well. Going to get capable of even better. This is generic dialogue, and let's just continue to see what really happens. So when you play a team with very high caliber players, you can sometimes switch off and not really be too bothered with the tactics unless an injury takes place, like it just did. But learning in general how to operate, even with high skill players, will make you a better manager when you take on like a challenge where you gotta bring up the second division team to Premier Division, or a Division One team to Premier Division. When you want to do these kinds of challenges, all these tactics really come into play because your players are not going to be good enough. They're not going to have enough cover. They're not going to have enough skill. So you want to, help them by putting all of these things into play. And oh, there we go. Money goes down. So Trent actually found the far post cross to Mane, and the Mane goes down, and hopefully we get a penalty here and no injuries. There we go. We got the penalty. I think it's Milner. Yeah, Milner will take it. Usually Milner will score. There's no question. There's no doubt about this. James Milner will score his penalties. I have a lot of confidence in him. So yeah. So you want to learn as much as you can so that when you operate with lower caliber teams, you can actually play around these tactics. You can actually use things to your advantage and use your knowledge as a tactical manager to fill in the void that the team has in specific roles, specific positions, and also in specific areas of the pitch where you feel that they lack depth. So you want to move certain players around to fulfill that depth. So yeah, it's those sort of things. So Fabinho also has a yellow card. I gotta switch out one of these defenders, and ideally I want to bring in Joe Gomez to replace Van Dijk so that he can continue to do the marking and also not be yellow carded. And Konate is also a good sub to replace Fabinho. So you know what? Let's not make the change first. Let's see. So Fabinho is here. Van Dijk is doing well, but he's getting slightly tired and he has a yellow card. So yeah, let's switch him out with. It's either Gomez or Konate. You know what? Just to be sure, right? Just to be sure. Let's see. Konate has got 15 marking, and Gomez has got 15 marking as well. Huh. They're both pretty good, actually. Yeah, but I feel that having Gomez is also a bit of depth. You know what? Let's actually give Konate a chance. Yeah, let's confirm the sub on Konate. I think the rest of the players are doing fine. Minamino is not doing very well, but I can't sub him off, unfortunately. So let's just do a shout and demand more from Minamino because he's not doing that well. Come on, Robertson. Come on, Robertson. That ain't what you call a cross. There we go. Trent. Nice cross to Mane. He's picking out the player really well, and especially the player that we designated. We want him to pick out Mane. Fabinho with the goal. Wow, okay. That's pretty impressive. Yeah, so the reason I wanted to put Joe Gomez there is because we are already out of two subs, and having Gomez allows him to cover in case Trent gets too tired. I can still switch out their roles a little bit, but I guess it's fine. It's whatever. So what is that? Oh, the goal was disallowed. Fine, that's whatever. Get another cross in. Alright, so now we have Adam Lallana actually taking revenge on Liverpool here by running forward on the wing. And there's a goal. Wow. Adam Lallana assist. So I think this is mostly due to the fact that Robertson is already carded. So he can't really do a tackle without risking it. And with the instruction to stay on foot, stay on his feet, Robertson is struggling to cover the left wing, which is why Lallana actually managed to get that goal in. We are 86 minutes in, and we already have 3 goals. I could change the tactic to be more defensive, but I think with the 2-goal advantage here, I'm not too worried. They might be able to get another goal in, but doesn't matter. We're going to win the game anyway. But if you're particular about clean sheets, ideally what you want to do is you want to bring your midfielders to drop into a more defensive position. So what you can do, actually, I can just show it to you. So what you can do is bring Leighton Clarkson and James Milner. Oops. Leighton Clarkson and James Milner to operate in a deep lying playmaker position. So let's just do deep lying playmaker support. Deep lying playmaker support, and we can bring Bobby Firmino to actually play. Um, Wait, what? Oh, that's James Milner. Thank God. I was wondering why does Firmino give me that option? Okay. Attacking midfielder support. That way. That way he operates a little bit deeper and not so high up the pitch. You could of course go a single defensive midfielder here. That's also a totally doable thing. You could go defensive midfielder support here, and you can swap these out. I think Leighton Clarkson operates pretty well as a defensive midfielder as well. And then box to box Milner. You can do this, and you can also tell your team to play in a more cautious style. But as you can see, they're not very happy about that play style because it's just doesn't suit them. But it will reduce your chances of actually being attacked by your opponent, and you can just slug them all the way to winning the game because you already have the goal advantage, right? Why not? All right, so let's go to the dressing room. I'm very happy. That game went well, except I lost two of my best forwards. So that's the only unfortunate bit. Okay, Carabao Cup quarter-final. Excellent. Mo Salah's injured for 3 days. That's very good. Diogo Jota out 3 days. Very good. So it's a good thing that we brought them out early because they are only injured for 3 days and they were injured after sprinting. What do you mean innocuously? Okay, whatever. Let's just continue. So right after the game, after you hit a single spacebar, you want to make sure you go to training, you check the rest, and you already make sure that this thing is sorted. Make sure that you sort this out pretty well. And let me go to my tactics and realize that I have made some changes just now that I haven't done here. So I'm going to leave these empty. I'm going to go to corners and I'm going to do this, which I did earlier. Edge of area, can I do that? Stay forward, attack, no, sorry, left, edge of area, stay forward. And then right now it is Sadio Mane. What I'm going to do is, yeah, actually, you know what? This thing varies, right? Because there are games when uh, these are not the players. It's not Salah, it's not Mane, it could be anyone else. And at that point, it may not seem that ideal. But you know what? I think it's fine just to make it a practice that the right midfield attacker is faster. I think that might just be a decent idea. Okay, and on the right also, let's move the attacking right midfielder here. Uh, oh, I can move you here. Oh, it's just for a two man. I think this doesn't really matter. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Okay. So right, let's just make sure edge of area, go back and stay forward. Okay, these are pretty cool. Now in the attacking scenario, let's see whether there are any changes that we can make. Something I realized I haven't done in this particular save. I did this before in like my previous game, but in this save, I didn't do this. So you can increase the defensive duties if you want. Trent. We have Trent on the back. Hmm. You know what? I think I want to keep my left defender here. Um. mm, just because Trent is just not that good. Um. In running back to defense. Uh. But yeah, yeah, I think that's fine. Let's see. Go forward. This is a go forward role. Let's see if we can go here. Uh, attack far post. Look near far post. Oh, no, 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 not this one. What is that? Roberto Firmino. Look outside area. Oh, that is the outside. Mm. Okay. So what we can do is we can put Trent to be on the lurking side of things, and yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. I think that'll be a slightly better tactics for Liverpool, especially. You guys can, of course, decide for yourselves. That is just the gist of the tactics that I want to talk about today. So, I mean, thanks for watching. This has been a quite a long video, I think. And I mean, there's a lot, right? There's a lot to football tactics. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to explore. And I think Football Manager does it really, really well for you to understand. And this does not even go into the details of the way a player can play a single pivot, double pivot, and also how the passes really come into play, because we have this passing thing here, which is the direct passing, the shorter passing, and how it affects the intensity of the play. You can pretty much tell that. And of course, you have the time wasting, which is a legit tactic in football. If you go to like max time wasting, the player takes like a minute to do a throw in. It's pretty insane. And I hate teams that like to waste time when they're on the win, but it's just the way football works. Once you have a goal in, you ideally just want to defend and waste as much time as possible. And it's a very dirty tactic for some people because it's just not entertaining to watch. But it works, and there are no rules against it. There's only rules when you waste too much time. But as long as you don't waste too much time, you can just keep doing that, and it's completely legit. And that's just the way football is meant to be played. You can do whatever you want. There's so many ways to go about it. And as for the out of position things, like forcing the opposition outside, inside, and all these things, this is totally up to you. If you feel you have a very good central defense, you want to force them inside. If you have a defensive midfielder, you want to force them inside or just take them head on. But if you don't have a defensive midfielder, you might want to force them outside so that your wingbacks can actually rush back in and help you cover. So this might be a better way of doing it. You can also see how the pitch changes. If you force them outside, your defenders basically come closer together and keep them on the edge. And this is just the way I like to do it. But you can experiment and you can figure it out as well. So yeah, once again, that's it from me. Remember, the most important thing is you have to understand your squad. You have to understand what your team is capable of. And the second thing you want to know is you want to make sure that the team is aligned to be in the right role and duty depending on the attributes that they have, and also their preferred foot and these sorts of things, whether they're inverted or non-inverted. And aside from that, you want to look out for certain stats like natural fitness, leadership, flair, which really cannot be changed. So you want to find players who have that naturally in them, because you cannot what do you call this, develop those stats, train those stats. And when it comes to development, you want to make sure that the player traits align with the player's position and role. You don't have traits that don't allow you to move the player around, makes it difficult for you to get depth in certain areas if you don't have players to cover for players that are injured. So traits are also quite important thing. The fourth thing is to make sure that you look out for injuries. You make sure that the players are not, what do you call this, at a high risk of injury when you actually put them into play. And also make sure that you have the right subs to cover for every position in the game. You have to have a sub for every single position. And it doesn't matter if that's not their strongest role. Like, for example, if I have Minamino can cover me for like almost every role in the forward position, which is why I find him a better cover than a lot of other attacking midfielders. Like Salah, Mane, these people can operate on almost any area of the frontal pitch, which makes them excellent cover for everyone in general. And also for like midfield, I can put Kamavinga in any midfield or defensive midfield position, makes him an excellent cover. And as for the defensive position, Joe Gomez is just better than players like Matip or even Konate. Actually, Konate, yeah, he's better than Konate because he can operate on both wings and also in the center and provide cover for any injured wing backs and whatnot. He may not be that good. His crossing is not that good, as you can see, but he can still perform well as a fullback in a defensive position. So all these things take effect. They really matter, and especially if you play in a team, as I said, with lower caliber, with lower strengths. these things are really, really important because they help your team. And of course, there's so many other factors that come into play in one of the best simulations games ever made, as I feel. Football Manager is definitely one of the best, and it's an excellent game. It's going to keep delivering, and I hope the next one comes up with even more things. Certain buttons here and there I feel are still missing. Certain quick buttons. I hope just there just to make it easier for new players, especially who don't really want to go in depth so much into tactics. And yeah, that's it for me, guys. Take care.